Okay, so we could do another example. So I found this really great tutorial. Yes, this is really, really, really good. So this person managed to create this animation. So they have a circle and they have the stroke of their circle like filling in. So it's moving over time. And they did this just with CSS and HTML and SVG embedded in HTML. So I thought that maybe we could just kind of look at it because it's quite complex, but maybe we can just break it apart and see what we can do here. Okay, so if I put this, so I just copied their HTML code right here. And I'm going to copy their CSS code. So the first thing to do if you're copying from the web, something like this, is just to put it in your own document and to make sure it works without changing anything. So that was their CSS code. This has proven useless. I'm going to delete it. And I've copied their, this is all of their CSS code. It's quite complex. So they have a bunch of comments explaining what they're doing. They have classes. You can recognize that this is a class based on the dot. They have these at rules, which we haven't covered yet, but it's basically, it's a rule. So it says if something is a certain way, do something else. And if it's a different way, do another thing. So you're connecting behavior with an attribute that may or may not be present depending on different conditions. So that's those rules. And then we have their work that they did. So I'm going to save this and then just see if it works at all. Okay, fantastic. So I have their code running on my computer natively. Great. Okay, so now let's take a look and see what it's doing. So just for the positive one, they have an SVG. So you recognize that now. This SVG tag is their image. And the SVG has a class, which is how they are determining how they're able to like move it around and like give it different effects. And that's actually how they're making the animation happen. And then we have inside of the SVG, we have circle tags, like actual circle tags. And it looks like they have the two circles. They have the background, so it's this gray thing. And then they have the animation. And you can tell that this is the gray thing because if you look at this color, EF, 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 that's a light gray, right? If FFF is white and 00060 is black, then EF, EF, EF must be a light gray. So we know that that's what that is, and it's defined with its stroke, and it has no fill. And then this is where it starts drawing the X and Y of the circle, and that's the radius of the circle. So the blue that's under it, we kind of get a clue that this is blue because it has 0 red value. And this color, very similar to this color. So we're like, okay, that's green and blue is giving us this color. Great. Has the same width. And then they use this, they use these attributes, dash array and line cap, to make it, the line cap is this round part. So that's the way we end the line. That's the way that we end the stroke. And then this dash array thing is how it's filling in. So it's saying 30 out of 100 here. So I think that if I change it to like 50, it will draw more. Yeah, there you go. So that determines the length of our fill. And then the other circle, that means, is doing the same thing. We have our gray circle, the blue one on top with a stroke. And here, the length of the stroke is determined the same way. So this is like a more complex use of an SVG. So in this case, like understanding the parts is maybe more important than building it up yourself sometimes if you're dealing with something like this. So it's like, how do you decipher this? Okay, so we have our length of our stroke, and we can change that to also, like, what if I just changed it to 2? That's it. So it went 2% of the circle, 2 out of 100. Or I could make it 100, but it would go in the opposite direction. Did I save? You can see that they both take the same amount of time to animate, which is also like a consideration when you're working on animations. Okay, so we have that, and then we have inside of this SVG, we also have text. So they could have, the person that made this tutorial could have taken the text outside and written it as HTML, but they chose to make it part of the image. So like whenever you copy the image and move it around, it'll always have that text inside of it. Okay, and now let's look at the CSS and how it is affecting our movement. So there's a few things here that I'm like, this is how it's displaying the circles next to each other. We have our font, layout styles, not needed for functionality. Very good commenting, very helpful. This is, okay, this is the animation. So it says at keyframes 2, 0 to 100. So pretty sure this is what's making the line animate in this direction. I'm pretty sure. And here it says circle chart appear 2 seconds forward. Okay, cool. So I think that's the one that's telling us to go this way, and it's saying how long it should take. So just to test this theory, I'm going to say 10 seconds. I could definitely tell the difference between 2 and 10 seconds. So I'll save this and reload. It doesn't feel like that. Oh, it's for the floating part. There was a secret, like, subtle float. Let's put it back to 2 and see. Yeah, okay, so there's a subtle floating letter thing going on. So good thing we tried that out, because that's not what I wanted to change. And then we have our circle chart negative, transform rotate 90 degrees, so it rotated backwards. Like, is it this? Let's see. What if we remove this? Okay, so that's how this person is determining where they start drawing from. So it's not the animation location, but it is how they're, or not the animation direction, but it is how they're determining where they're drawing with this transform. So we kind of learned about transforms already, so it's helpful to learn that part. Okay, cool. We like this backwards part. What about this animation? Is this our backwards drawing? Maybe. It says reverse animation circle chart fill. It's a good indication that might be it. Let's see. That's moving very slowly. So maybe that's it. That's our speed. Great. It kind of looked like, yeah, that was for both of them. So both of them slowed down when we did this. And you can see it feels like the one that's 30% forward animated much faster than the one that's 10% backwards, because the 10% one is so much shorter, it appears that it's moving more slowly than the 30% one, because the 30% has to produce more pixels over less time. So it feels like it's going really, really fast, but it's not. I'm pointing at it with my finger on my screen, but you can't see that. So if I was making this animation, maybe I would make the 31 go at 10 seconds and the 10% one go at 2 seconds or something like that. Okay, now this, I'm curious as to what this does. So I'm like, I'll just delete the 90. Let's see. Where is it? So somehow this one has a separate transform on it than that one. Very curious. Yeah, here we go. So this one has a different start point that's determined over here. All right, well, I think it's pretty cool. I urge you to look at different tutorials online for your assignments. So for your assignment, you're supposed to make an SVG, and we explored the way of making it all by hand from scratch like this, which was interesting. I still am curious about my viewport weird thing that popped up. SVGs have a lot of really cool attributes to them. So if you look at SVG at W3 schools, you will find all the information right here. So you can actually make circles and ellipses, rectangles, polygons, of course. So polygon, a circle and a rectangle is a polygon. So that's why I just went for polygons directly. But they have these presets, just like an Illustrator, of circle and rectangle over here, and explanations about stroking. But also these really cool, you can put an effect on your SVG. That's amazing. You can also do these really awesome radial gradients to fill your SVG. So I highly recommend looking over here on how to build up your SVGs, but also looking at stuff like this. Because once you start combining CSS and SVG together, you can really make some wild things. And let's say this is really cool, but maybe I don't want to make this a chart, I want to make this a loading bar. You can think about how you would translate this code to make it into a loading circle. So I would for sure remove the text for starters. Or maybe if I had any text, I would just say loading, but I wouldn't, and I wouldn't have a negative chart. I would just have it going in one direction, clockwise, and I would have it going to 100. Right? So when I'm loading something, I want it to go from 0 to 100. And once it gets to 100, then maybe I would have something else happen. But now this looks like a loading bar, right? And then you can change your text. And here I would, if you're taking something like this, write based on tutorial from right? Attribute your work, not just for me, so that I know how you suddenly like know all these amazing things. And so I don't think that you're just like, so I know where your work is coming from, basically, but also for anyone that might see your code later. You know, if your website is up and some person that's online comes across it and they're like, wow, I really love that loading circle. Like, I want to know how to make one too. If they look at your webpage, they won't necessarily, like, this won't necessarily be enough of an explanation for them. And so if you have a link, then they can find out where things are coming from. Okay. So now it says loading. So that's one way you can make your SVG is by adopting something like this. And another way is our good old Illustrator or Inkscape. I even have Inkscape. So let's see how it opens differently in Inkscape. Okay, here's my star. And it's kind of cool. You can see when I change the color of the stroke in Atom, it's here now in Illustrator. So it's very cool that you can go between the two programs. I love that aspect of working with SVGs. So you can make them like this and export them. And you can also make them this way and export them and then modify the code afterwards. So yeah, I guess that is the end of my SVG tour. Oh, Inkscape, you're finally alive. Okay. Can I open you? Amazing. Okay, here it is. It just took a while. So you see it has the same like zoom. It has points you can draw. It should have points that you can draw. There we go. You can draw lines with it, but it's just a little it's a little clunkier. This is an old version of Inkscape too, so when you if and when you download the new one, it will be a lot smoother than this. But yeah, we have the same zoom and we can look at it and see that it has the same changes that propagated